Happy Sunday. We in the middle of November, getting there. Happy 11/11, which was yesterday, for those of you who follow numerology and all things meaning, all things meaning, having a meaning. Happy, happy, happy. I'm so grateful to be with you. I am Coach Yolanda, owner of Evolving Spirit Wellness, international spiritual life coach, Reiki master, meditation guide, certified birth doula, lactation coach, get the dot, all of the good things. Hi, hope and victory. Hello to you and everyone, whether you are watching us live. We join on YouTube and on Facebook every Sunday, not every Sunday, but most Sundays at 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. If you are watching the replay, which many of you also do, thank you, thank you, thank you. Leave a comment, say hello, ask a question. I will be able to respond. In that way. I used to have a website. I did away with the website. When I tell you I'm downsizing in particular areas of my life, that is what I mean. But today we get to talk about, during our inner child healing series, we get to talk about justice. Hey, Miss Erica, how are you? I'm so grateful that you are here. Y'all are faithful, tried, and true. And for that, I send you so many blessings. You have my heart. What goes on before I come on is so hilarious to me. Sometimes I'm running around like a chicken trying to get myself together. Um, Today was one of those days. And the thought is always, I got to be on time. I got to be on time. People are depending on me. People are waiting on me. And we are healing together, knowing I don't always know what's going to go on Monday through Saturday. But I know Sunday at 1 o'clock, there are a group of us that come together at a particular time on one accord because we are supporting one another and loving one another. So that is something that gives me joy, even if it's in a platform that I don't particularly care for. I don't particularly love the sound of my voice, nor do I like to look at myself on camera, but here we are, and I'm so grateful for it. And so last week we started, I started reading some tenets, or what I like to call declarations, from the book Healing the Child Within by Charles Whitfield. We started with the first two. I said there were 10. There are 15, and we're going to go through all 15. We're just going to do two today, as we did two last week, and then we might increase in the following week. I also have an idea that sprang up in me the other day to include some chakra healing for our inner children. I've done it before, and I've done it in other places and spaces, and hopefully you guys can hear me. I've done it in other places and spaces, and I think it is of value to do it here. Maybe closer to December, we might do that, but we're going to get through the 15 precepts from Healing the Child Within by Charles Whitfield. And what these 15 premises are, it's to help all of us come to sort of a reconnection with our inner children by moving all of these other things out of the way, by telling ourselves, by reminding ourselves that, number one, as children, whatever occurred, we were innocent. The child is always innocent. And it's important to phrase it that way, because we are all children. Even in this right now moment, we are childlike. And so the child within you is always innocent. If there are things, even at the age that you are now, if there are things that you have not been developmentally prepared for, or that you have not experienced, you are childlike. And that childlike innocence is something that you must remember. We are so hard on ourselves, particularly with things that we are new at. You know, we want to be best, we want to be perfect, we want to be experts at the beginning. If you are in the beginning of your healing stage, you are like a child. Even if you're in the middle of it, there are particular elements of your healing experience where you are going to go through them like a child, as if it is the first time because it is. You have never seen this day, November 12th, 2023. There are particular things that you can assume will happen. There are particular things you can expect to happen. But in many ways, all of us are like children waiting to see what experience comes into our life at any particular moment. And the child within you is, was, and will always be innocent. Doesn't mean you don't have responsibility. Doesn't mean that you're not responsible for particular things, but the things that you are not or have not been developmentally prepared for, in many ways, you are innocent. And look at it in the purest sense of the word, meaning this is new to me. And if particular things happen, then I am learning through that experience. I am in the midst of needing a new car. Now, I've purchased a car before on my own with other people, but every single time I do it, it's a different experience. There are elements of it that I can expect. There are elements of it that I'm familiar with, things I know I need to do, but I'm always going to be dealing unless I, purchase from the same person over and over. But every time I go through that experience, there is an innocence within me because it feels like there are elements that I have not been prepared for. If someone says something about an engine, I don't know anything about engines. I'm ignorant of those things. There are particular things I know, there are particular things I don't know. And so, in many ways, this new experience I'm going into with a particular innocence doesn't mean that I'm not responsible, doesn't mean that I can't learn. But I have to not hold myself to a standard that's unreasonable because of something that I don't know. So let yourself off the hook, particularly when you're doing your inner child healing and you start to romanticize the past and say, well, if it was this way or if it was that way, then maybe I wouldn't have gotten so hurt, or maybe I would. The shoulda, coulda, wouldas will take you under. Look at your past experiences where you may not have known all that you needed to know, where your maturity level may not have been where you would like for it to have been, and look at it with an innocence in its purest form so that you are not holding on to shame, guilt, regret, and the coulda, woulda, shouldas. The second one, all children, even those of us who have childlike innocence within us in this moment, all children need care, protection, security, warmth, and appropriate skin contact. If some of these things were missing in your childhood experience, it doesn't negate the fact that you needed them then, and you probably need a good dose of them now. We still need it. I just saw a video where women were talking about experience with their mother, and one of the women said, I don't care how old you get, you will always, always, always need that connection that one tends to have with their mother. I don't care how old I get, I still need my mama. My mama's not here, but I still need mothering. I still need mother like guidance. And that's never going to go away. So I still need caring for, I still need to be protected. I still need security, warmth, and appropriate skin contact. Now, many of those things I get through my connection with the God of my understanding. I am cared for, I am protected, I feel secure, I feel the warmth. And even the appropriate skin contact. When I'm meditating, when I'm doing those things for myself, caring for my body, the way in which God intended me to do so, I am still getting those things that I need. Yes, we need those things externally to come from external sources. But for me, my primary source for many of these things that children need comes from my connection with God. And many of us may find in our spiritual walk that we will redefine what some of these things mean because of our different perspective, because of a different consciousness. Now, you can think right now, care is somebody cooking for you, someone, making sure your finances are straight. That could mean care for you. Care for someone else in a deeper sense can mean that I'm considered, that I wake up every single morning recognizing that the God of my understanding cares and loves me. That is something that cannot be taken away by man, by woman, or by child, or by even me. The protection, the security that I find within my spirituality and my connection with a higher power cannot be taken away by someone else because it's a relationship that I am developing. So many of these things that we needed as children, which would come from an external force, as we mature, as we age, as we get older and have more life experience, we may find that we are creating many of these things in a spiritual sense. And if we are pouring into ourselves in that way, then we won't feel as though it's missing if it's not coming from an external presence, if it's not coming from another person, or if people are withholding it, or if it just doesn't exist in some of our relationships. Doesn't mean that you don't still need it and that it's not still important. Those romantic relationships, friend relationships, family relationships, those are important. And these elements should be a part of all of our relationships. But that relationship you have with self, which is a direct correlation with the relationship that you have with a higher power, many of these elements can be found there as well. So those were the first two. I thought it would be appropriate to meditate on those two before we move on to the next two. Yes, please respond in the comments if you think that's a good idea or if you have a question, or if what I said to you last week was find ways to make sure that you are creating these elements for yourself. If you want to take a moment to discuss, how did you care for yourself this week, last week? How did you protect yourself? How did you feel secure? Where did warmth come from internally? And how did you start to reconnect with yourself by creating a regime of appropriate skin contact? Sometimes we're just going through the motions when we are taking care of our body that we're really not taking care of our bodies. We're not taking the time to check our skin, to give it what it needs. I don't know what your moisturizing routine looks like, but does it include some elements of love and admiration and saying all of the things that you need to hear? Did you do that for yourself this week? And are you committed to continuing that? Because it is an important element of healing, to making sure that these things are present, making sure that you are reminded of your innocence and that you are reminded of the things that you needed when you were young that you still need now, and that you can give yourself those things. You can find those things in your relationship with a higher power, and that may also create a better understanding and respect for the interactions that you have with other people. Making sure that these things are present, making sure that you are providing and also receiving in a balanced way. If I am caring, caring, caring for others and no one is caring, caring, caring for me, that's an imbalance. And so I recognize and honor the sacredness of these elements in every one of my relationships. Many of you know that I work around children, and children are sponges. They absorb everything. And I have this little girl, every time she sees me, she says, "Can I sit on your lap?" And I will always say to her, yes, if your mommy is present, if your mommy says it's okay, because I want her to know what appropriate contact sounds like. You may have to make sure that it's okay with mommy. And so I have to tell her every single week when I see her, you can sit in my lap if mommy says it's okay. And she kind of looks at me like, well, mommy's not here. And I'll say, mommy's not here, then no, ma'am, you cannot sit in my lap. But if mommy's here, absolutely, I will pick you up and put you in my lap because you asked me for it. So if that's something that little girl wants, I'm going to make sure that it's done in an appropriate way. How many of us are doing that for ourselves? Sometimes people just go in to hug you and they haven't asked you, or sometimes people want to hold your hand and they haven't asked you, or you don't feel comfortable doing that. Making sure that your relationship with appropriate skin contact is still happening for you today, because maybe it didn't happen for you when you were younger. And that is going to transition into the two tenets that we have. Hey, Giselle, how are you, my love? Happy Sunday to you as well. So, before we get into the next two, we are going to have, I'll call a mini meditation where we calm ourselves down. I actually have a note that says pause. I'm training myself or retraining myself to pause, to make sure that I'm giving my body what it needs, the appropriate amount of oxygen. So I'm making sure that I'm breathing. I'm retraining my body to make sure that I am mindful of what I'm saying, that I'm not just saying things just because I want to fill up space. So that's another reason why I'm being mindful about pausing. I'm pausing to scan my environment, and not because I think something is going to hurt me or harm me, but because I want to appreciate where I am in each moment. Like right now, I'm pausing, I'm talking to y'all, but I'm also looking at my plants, and I'm so grateful that I'm surrounding myself with nature in my home as well as outside of my home. I'm also pausing to see all of the work that I have to do in my home. The holidays are coming up, and right now, every room in my house looks like a bomb went off. I don't know if y'all are experiencing that too, as you take things from other rooms and you may be getting rid of things. That's what I'm doing. But every single room in my house right now is a mess. And so I'm looking at that, but not with, oh my God, I got to do this, I got to do that, but looking at it like I'm grateful for all that I have been able to accumulate. And I'm ready to let go of some things that no longer serve a purpose. And this is part of that process. And so I'm grateful that I've been able to surround myself with things that make me feel good. And I'm grateful that I know when those things no longer make me feel good and I can release them out into the world in an appropriate way. And so before we move into justice, let's balance, let's breathe, let's be open to new ideas, new concepts as we begin this week in a way that honor and serves us all. Let's give thanks in this moment for everything that has brought us to this moment, all of the experiences, all of the interactions, all of the conversations that we've had with ourselves and with others that have allowed us to come to this moment where we can take a moment to sit with like minded individuals with our hearts open, with our minds open, to receive what we need to receive, to hear what we need to hear, and to give whatever is necessary for that moment. Knowing that there is a higher power, a higher consciousness within us all, connecting us and guiding us moment by moment by moment. We say thank you. We say thank you for the balance that is now going on in our bodies. Thank you for the balance that is now going on in our mind. And thank you, thank you, thank you for the balance that is within our spirit, in our soul. Knowing that at any moment we have great command over our mind, our body, and our spirit by pausing, by breathing, and by making the request that harmony, balance be a part of our consciousness now and always. And as we are reminded by the awarenesses in our body that are there to show us that we are living, breathing elements of this great universe, let us not dismiss them. Let us become more aware of when our bodies are speaking to us, whether it is a whisper or a loud shout. Let us be present enough to answer each and every time our body has something to say. And we thank all of the elements that are around us and within us, ascended masters, ancestors, spirit guides, all those in this realm and beyond who whisper, who shout, who pull and push us, who guide us into those places and spaces where we get to see a version of ourselves that shows us the truth of who we are. Spiritual beings having a human experience. And how magic that is. How magical that really, really is. Let us be mindful of the power within us that is present at all times when we acknowledge, when we affirm, when we are so aware and accepting of who we are and the way in which spirit expresses through us. That our humanness cannot hold us from anything. That place and space where we become beyond limits, and where we rise to the occasion and sometimes surprise ourselves with the wisdom that we draw upon because it's there, it's been there, it is there now, it will always be there. It pulled us into existence physically and will take us when it is time for us to transition into another experience. That push and pull. We were pushed into a physical human experience and we will be pulled out of it. With that last draw of our breath, none of us knowing when it will come. It will happen for each and every single one of us. But the power that is within us does not end. It transcends into something greater. Let us not forget that as we are dealing with the human challenges of our day-to-day living. Let us not forget that we are more than our human bodies that have limitations. And so the gift that we can give our inner children, the justice that we can give, is really about love. It's really about loving ourselves in such a way that we would give this gift that sometimes we're seeking outside of ourselves, because justice is different for everyone. You could have an experience where 20 people were present and maybe there was a wrongdoing, maybe 20 people are present and there was a robbery, whatever may occur. All 20 people are experiencing something similar. And each one of them could think that the justice that they now deserve is different. Let's say 20 of us were in a Starbucks, the Starbucks got robbed, and they took everything from everyone in that building at that particular time. And then they were caught. Every single person in that Starbucks could think of how they could be restored, how justice could be given out, and it would be different. Some would say, lock them up forever. Some would say, send them to a program. Some would say, well, you know what? I wasn't hurt, so I'm okay. Some would want to know, well, why did they rob the store? Some would not even care. Off with their heads. Everyone could come up with a different definition of what would be just, what would justify what we all experience. And so justice can be thought of as restoration. But many people will tell you, particularly if you're thinking about the justice system here in the United States, many people will tell you there's never full restoration, right? When any one of us has been harmed or hurt or felt as though we've been exploited in some way, that stays with you. And no amount of retribution could make you feel whole again. You know, I've heard of loved ones who have lost, someone to violence, and maybe that person is caught, and even if they're sent away for the rest of their life, and they can say justice was served today, there is always going to be a piece of your soul that never really quite feels restored, because the imprint does not go away. The impact does not go away. And there are many individuals who, right now in their lives, are seeking justice from some injustice that has been done to them, or someone in their family, or generations. Many of us who have had the experience of enslavement in our family line are still trying to resolve the trauma that occurred because of that unjust act. And no matter what we come up with, it may never feel like full restoration and retribution. And so when you're talking about your inner child, that is a very individualized and unique experience that we all have. What happened to us in our childhood, and where you may feel as though justice was never really given. Maybe there was something that happened that no one ever asked for forgiveness or even acknowledged that it happened. And so here you are left with this heaviness, and asking yourself, what do I do with this? And so last year, I talk about this all the time. We read All About Love by Bell Hooks. And there was an entire chapter devoted to justice, childhood love lessons, because for many of us, we learn our first lessons of love in our childhood. You learn to love your caregivers because they're taking care of your needs. Babies come into this world, they don't know, I love my mom, I love my dad. They don't even understand what that experience is. But we all, as humans, understand when someone is taking care of us. Someone is feeding us. I'm hungry, you fed me. I was wet, you changed me. I was cold, you gave me warmth. We come to understand, I rely on this person, on this figure, because they take care of me. They're gentle with me. They sing to me. They hold me. They make me feel better. So therefore, love starts to become a concept. Many of our childhood lessons on injustice are also carried out by the very people who are supposed to care for us. Intentionally, unintentionally, consciously, unconsciously, we are all hurt by our caregivers. Whether it's, I want to stay up all night long and watch TV and eat stuff that's bad for me, but mommy won't let me. Kids can think that that's an injustice. I want this toy and you won't buy it for me. That's an injustice. I want to wear my tutu to school and you won't let me. That's an injustice. Children feel like everything is an injustice because they just want to be able to do whatever they want to do. And the adults are like, yeah, that would be chaos and carnage if we let you guys do that. And so that's at one extreme. The other extreme are those traumatic events or experiences that may have happened in your childhood that are greatly impacting you right now in this moment. And you've never felt restored. And now we are left to pick up the pieces, put things back together, and try to figure out. And sometimes that can be hard to identify if, in fact, the other person that is ingrained in that experience is someone that you love. It could be your mother, it could be your father, your grandparents, your siblings. When you love someone deeply and they have hurt you, it can be hard to balance that in your mind. And you might need to, out of survival, you might need to retell the story or ignore it altogether. I absolutely remember, because there weren't many times, I remember the times that my mother gave me a spanking. My mother didn't really give me spankings. My dad was the spanker. My dad was the one that doled out the punishment. If my mother had to, it was because something horrible had happened in her mind or she was at her wit's end. So I don't really remember my mother spanking me except for very specific times. But I remember those times and it broke my heart. because I wasn't used to her doing that. Getting a spanking from my dad was like, is it a Tuesday? Is it a Wednesday? It became to be something that, unfortunately, as a child, I got used to. That man was angry about a lot of stuff. And it wasn't that we were getting spankings all the time, because we didn't. Um, but I do remember specifically the times when my mother spanked me. And that felt like an injustice, even if in her mind it was something she had to do to discipline her child because she didn't want her child to do particular things. We could have a whole discussion on corporal punishment, because that's really what it is: spanking, beating. I see the debate is still going on today, or should you spank, shouldn't you spank? That's a discussion for another time. How do you heal and resolve those injustices when the perpetrator is someone that you love, and you know that the intention was for your good? You know it was, because they told you that. I'm beating you for your own good, or I'm punishing you for your own good, or this discipline that I'm giving you is for your own good. When you're a child and your brain is not fully formed, you may not receive it that way, and it feels like an injustice. And so, one of the tenets that shows up in the Healing the Child Within by Charles Whitfield, that we all have to resolve for ourselves, is that abuse of any form can create a lifelong imprint. Abuse of any form, any degree of abuse, abandonment, rejection, or neglect of a child has lifelong effects. Let's take a breath on that. I'm going to read it again. Any degree. I don't care if you didn't want your mother to leave and go to work, and she's like, I gotta go to work, and close the door and left you, and you felt abandoned. Any degree of abuse, abandonment, rejection, or neglect of a child has lifelong effects. Now, before we go any further, yes, parents have to go to work. Yes, parents have to make decisions that sometimes impact children, but it is exceeds our understanding at the moment, because remember, children are innocent. And so the way that you think as a child, everything can feel like an injustice. Anything can feel like abuse. We're not talking about intent right now. We are not talking about intent. We are talking about healing our inner children. And anyone could come along and say, well, your mother had to go to work. You ungrateful child. How dare you feel abandoned? Even if the truth is mama had to go to work, it still doesn't negate the way I felt about it. Even if we had to move 20 times in my childhood, it doesn't negate the fact, the imprint that it made. So please, let's do away with right, wrong, who did what they shoulda, coulda, woulda. This is not what the healing is about. Right now, we have to tell the truth. And the truth is, every single parent has to make decisions that impact children in a way that can feel like injustice. That's the way you see it when you are a child. And that may be the way that you carry it through your life until you get to a point of emotional maturity where you can see it differently. I know that was a lot, but we're healing. And it's literally like surgery. You got to pull this out, pull that out to get to the wound. How to heal if our caregivers, after all these years, won't change, even though we are already adults. That is why we are doing this work. Because waiting for other people to heal you, you could be waiting to the end of your life. We have to do this work for ourselves so that the imprint of things that happened doesn't make us sick, doesn't make us continue the cycle. And so that is what we're talking about today. If you focus on who was right, who was wrong, who was a villain, who was a victim, you're going to lose sight of what it is that you truly want, which is peace, freedom, and healing. If you get into a cycle of somebody's got to be the villain, then ultimately you have to be the victim. And living your life as a victim is going to get in the way of your healing. And I know it could feel like a betrayal to your spirit to let particular things go. I don't want you to let it go. I want you to actually elevate the way that you see it, your perception, your consciousness. Many of our parents were dealing with issues that were unresolved for them, and they transferred a lot of their trauma to their children. I know I have transferred my trauma onto my children, and I'm certain that my children will transition will transmit some of their trauma. It is part of the human experience. That is what we do. If we look at the world right now and we see things that are going on, conflicts that have not been resolved over hundreds of years, because we all just keep transferring the trauma over to generation to generation to generation until someone says, enough is enough. I can no longer look at this, who was right, who was wrong, who shoulda, coulda, woulda done this because it's happened. How can I look at this in a way that frees me from the bondages of shame, regret, anger, and all of the other things that keep us from seeing things clearly? I don't want to look at every single person that has abandoned me with a particular viewpoint because that keeps me hostage to whatever they want. I can't do that. I can't hold somebody else's nastiness in my heart because then neither one of us can be free. And so, if your caregivers are still the people they were when you were a child, that is a very clear example to you that your healing is fully your responsibility. I love it when families can heal together. As a spiritual life coach, I have worked with families, I have worked with couples, I have worked with siblings, I have worked with parents and children because they both agreed that they want to heal. And one of the elements of that healing is y'all got to give up who was right, who was wrong, who was the villain, who was you got to give it up because it serves no purpose and it gets in the way of forgiveness, compassion, and healing. It takes a lot to do that. Doesn't mean that y'all got to be best buddies. Doesn't mean that you forget what happened. What you are saying when you want to heal is, I want to see this from a different perspective that no longer keeps me hostage and that doesn't allow this nastiness to spill into other areas of my life. And so I'm going to read from All About Love because you bring up a very, very good point about caregivers. And it says, this is a statement by Judith Viorst. Severe separations in early life leave emotional scars on the brain because they assault the essential human connection, the parent-child bond, which teaches us that we are lovable. So that very first human experience between parent and child, caregiver, because not all of us were raised by our parents, but that very first bond teaches us that we are lovable. The parent-child bond, which teaches us how to love. We cannot be whole humans. We cannot be whole humans. Indeed, we may find it hard to be human without the sustenance of this first attachment. So if that very first relationship got off on the wrong foot, then every subsequent relationship may also have elements of that relationship. That is why we do inner child healing. It is not to put our parents up on a blackboard and write around them, you did this wrong, you did this wrong, you did this wrong, you did this wrong. That serves no purpose. You have to tell the truth. And so if you have been hurt, if there is trauma, if there are particular things in your life that are still holding you hostage, you have to tell the truth about them. The way you get free from it, the way you heal from it, the way you make peace with it, because it's never going to leave you. That energy is never going to leave you. It's like, how am I able to stand firm on who I am when the people who have hurt me have never apologized, don't even see that they did anything wrong, and continue the same type of behavior? You have to free yourself. If you are waiting for them to have a light bulb moment and say, "Oh my gosh, I did hurt you, and I'm sorry, please forgive me." If you're waiting on that, you're going to be waiting a very long time. You could potentially be waiting a long time. Doesn't mean that it's impossible and that at some point in their life that they won't, seek some sort of forgiveness. But are you going to wait on that? I'm not waiting for anyone, including my own children, to give me my healing. I'm going to create it for myself. And so, any form of abuse at any degree, even if it was not that person's intent. And I can tell you, I remember getting a spanking from someone that wasn't even my parents because of I understand it now that it was something that they felt they needed to do because they thought something was going to happen. They thought I was going to hurt somebody. They thought, and it was the only way that they knew to stop it. When I was 7 years old, that's not what it felt like. It felt like a crushing of my soul. I was embarrassed in front of the other children. I instantly thought, well, I thought I was doing something good, and now you hit me because of it. So I'm not going to try to help anybody else. Like, it created all of these things in my 7-year-old brain that still I'm sitting here telling you about it. So it's an imprint that I'm never going to forget, and it changed the way that I associated with this other individual forever. Never forgot it. So it got in the way of our relationship. We were from the time I was 7, I'm telling you, to the time I'm 53, 52 years old. I still remember it. It's still there. And it has been there in our relationship. It's always been in the forefront of my mind. Like, yeah, I remember when you did that thing to me. And even though we were still able to be cordial and loving to one another, I never forgot it. And now I can think, now that I'm thinking about it, it's like, wow, if I had healed that part of me earlier, it could have changed the dynamic of our relationship where we would be in a better place. And so the healing has to be for you in any form, even if the intent was not to hurt you. And in some people's mind, that's never the intent. We're human. We do what we do. We say what we say. And we're not always thinking of how it's going to land on the other person. We just do it until the other person says, "Hey, you hurt my feelings." And even when they say that, sometimes we're like, "But I didn't mean to." Doesn't mean that you didn't. Even if it was not the intention, doesn't mean that it doesn't create a lifelong imprint. And it gets in the way of your relationship with yourself, your relationship with other people. When we say, "Oh, I don't trust people," where do you think that starts? In childhood. That's where we learn to develop trust. And when it's broken, we learn to not trust what people say, what people do, and even the things that we see before our eyes. I always laugh at the memes where they show people shopping, or someone says, "This is how, particularly Black folks shop." Like, we never take the item that's first on the shelf. We'll reach behind all of the other ones and take the one. That's because we don't trust things. You have a history of people who have learned not to trust things. And so we carry that. You think about the energy it takes to always make sure you're safe and protected, that you're not trusting this, you're not trusting that. That takes a lot of energy. But that comes from a form of something that's imprinted on each and every single one of us, where we are wary of other individuals. But think about how that gets in the way of your relationship with yourself, where you don't even trust yourself. And I was just saying before I came on, I was putting my face on. You can see one of my eyebrows is higher than the other because I'm thinking as I'm doing my face. I'm like, I know now I can't make a list of names, but I know that there are probably throughout my lifetime that there were people who probably, including me, who probably felt like this world would be better if Yolanda wasn't in it. Whether it was a fleeting thought, whether it was a deep down to the bone thought, I am sure that there are individuals, and like I said, including myself, who felt like life would be easier if I was not present, if I wasn't here. And not because I have been a monster. I don't always know how what I say, what I do, and who I am, how it affects other people. I'm sure my kids at one time or another have said, I wish she wasn't my mother. I wish she wasn't my girlfriend. I wish she wasn't my sister. I wish she wasn't my niece. I wish she wasn't my. I'm sure the thought has crossed their mind. There have been times where I'm like, I wish I wasn't the way that I am. Where do we think that type of feeling comes from? It starts to develop very, very early by all of these things that happen. Again, no matter the degree or the intent, they start to build within us and we start to believe it and hear it in our head. That person doesn't like me. That person doesn't love me. I can't go here. I can't find refuge there. When you take all of your life experience, and you may not remember all of it or the totality of all of the times that you felt like, I don't want to be here, or I make things difficult for other people, whatever the story is that we all tell ourselves, to free yourself from that takes a lot of work. It's continuous, which is why we are going through these premises to remind ourselves that as a child, you were always innocent and that you were deserving of these things from your caregivers. Every single child in existence is deserving of these things. Every human in existence is deserving of these to live. And I haven't even gotten to the other one. We're talking about abuse of any form creates a lifelong impact. Let's talk about the experience of exploitation. Let's take a breath while I say this. The needs of a child are seldom fulfilled in a sufficient or unexploited manner. In fact, most adults consciously or unconsciously exploit the child's needs to satisfy their own. Take a breath. Oh my gosh, it feels like a criminal act. But most of us have an experience of exploitation as children. We just experienced it. For those of you who celebrate Halloween, how many kids get forced into dressing up as characters that they don't even know who it is for the enjoyment of others? We did it to my granddaughter. We asked her, what do you want to be? A cat. Now, does she really want to be a cat? We don't know, but she knows that it's going to be pleasing because everybody gets to look at her and say, oh, she's so cute. It's a form of exploitation. We put children out and tell them to dance, tell them to sing, tell them to do stuff to make us happy. It's holiday time. How many of y'all are going to be dragged to a winter concert at a school with kids playing instruments horribly and singing horribly? I'm not saying it's not a good thing. It is a good thing. But it is a form of exploitation. It's like, y'all get up there, put on a pretty dress and sing for us to make us happy. It's part of the human experience. Waiting for anyone to acknowledge their wrongdoing and working on our healings anyway. Child, I don't even acknowledge all my wrongdoing. So for me to wait for somebody else to say to me, you know what, I did you wrong, Yolanda, and I'm sorry. I don't even acknowledge. Matter of fact, my daughter told me the other day, you don't ever say sorry. I said, I don't. And I had to think about it. And I said to her, because I'm very rarely wrong. If it's her experience with me that I very rarely say sorry, I don't tell her she's wrong. She's telling me what her experience is, that I don't ask for forgiveness. I don't say sorry. And so waiting for other people to acknowledge their wrongdoing is probably the most harmful thing that you can do in your healing experience. And many of us feel like if I'm this, if I'm that, if I do this healing work, they will see it and maybe it will encourage and influence them to say sorry to me. Please stop trying, because that's exploitation and manipulative. Please stop trying to get other people to do your healing work for you, even if they were the cause of you doing the healing work. Please stop waiting for your mama, your father, your spouse. Please stop waiting for other people to heal you. It is your work. I'm sorry. It is your work. It's our work. Now we can work together. And I ask people, please don't make my life any more difficult. So now I got to heal that. But my healing work is personal because no one is going to know what it feels like. Even if, again, their intent was not to hurt me, you don't know what it feels like to me. You don't know what I hear. You don't know what I see. You don't know what's going on in my mind at a particular moment. And you might say something, say the wrong thing at the right time that creates something within me that now I got to deal with and I got to heal. Whew, being human is not easy. It is a black thing. Yes, we do. We are not going to take the first thing off the shelf. We're going to go back. We're going to go all the way in the back. Now they all came out of the box at the same time. The only thing that I won't do that with is maybe milk or eggs, because I know that sometimes people will push stuff to the back, and I want the freshest. So yeah, it's a black thing because it's a trust factor. There is this, you take a culture that has been impacted by the trauma of enslavement, racism, and white supremacy, and all. Trust can be a big one for us. Again, we just went through Halloween. And how many of us, and this is not just a black thing, but how many of us either didn't participate, or if we did participate, it was like, give me that bag of candy. Let me look at it before you even taste it. Don't you eat that because people are doing this, people are doing that. Like we live in a society where people actually do those kind of things. So we don't trust anyone. And yet we still send our babies out there to get candy from strangers. It's just, when you think about it, it's just odd behavior, but it is a human experience of exploitation. We do it all of the time to one another. How can you make me happy? How many times have we bought things, presents for other people? And it's not so much because they're going to love it, but we love it and we want them to love it. It's like, you're going to love this. I'm going to take you somewhere and you're going to love it. And they wind up not liking it and you're offended. It is a slight form of exploitation. And I said this last week, that many of the things that adults do to children or impress upon children is to make them pleasing. We go through the motions of bringing children into the world, and then we want to shape and mold them to be pleasing to us. I just heard a woman have this revelation about her daughter. And she's like, she's 12 years old. And I realize that I can't force her to be what I want her to be. She's got to figure out her life path for herself. She said, of course, I'm there to protect her and to guide her. But ultimately, she has got to figure out her life for herself. Not many of us had that experience growing up. There were things that were dictated for us. And it's my understanding that those of you who are first generation born on in US soil, maybe your parents came from another country, you don't get to choose much of anything because of the sacrifices that your parents made to bring you here. You have a destiny to fulfill. I hear very many of my friends from the African diaspora. It's like you're going to be a doctor, engineer, lawyer, and that's about it. Or maybe a nurse. But you don't get to choose. Your path is chosen for you because of the things that your caregivers endured to make sure that you had this life. And many of us still carry that. Is it an experience of exploitation? Yes. Take away the definition that the intent was to harm or cause trauma. Take that out of your consciousness and look at it in its purest form. I know I do it. I still do it to my children. Yes, I want them to not give me grief. I want them to not make me suffer. And so, yes, I will form conditions so that it is pleasing to me. And so I'm not driven crazy. But when we are doing inner child work, we have to tell the truth. And we have to tell the truth about the experience of exploitation. Many of us had the experience that we were asked to do things or told to do things that we did not want to do for the pleasure or enjoyment of the adults in our lives. No matter the degree, it still creates an imprint where you have a generation of people pleasers, people who don't know how to say no. How many times, it's holiday time. How many of us are going to force our families to dress up and go places they don't want to go? Even if they have a good time later, we love that photo opportunity. Y'all put these pajamas on, put these sweaters on so we can get this picture. And everybody's like, I don't want to do this. You gonna do it because it makes me happy. And sometimes it's not a crime. It's not a big to do, but it is a form of exploitation. We have people right now who are getting in trouble for exploiting their children on the internet, making them do things so that other people can watch, so they can make money. And if we are doing any amount of healing, then we have to tell the truth about those experiences that we have had in our life where we felt exploited. And I can absolutely think of times when I may have fought my mother hard on things either I didn't want to do, places I didn't want to go. I could tell y'all about this story where I was literally thrown into the car and forced to go to a family member's house. And I just did not want to go. There was just, I don't even know why, but I can tell you, I still feel it in my bones that I just did not want to be in their presence. And I was forced to go. And not only forced to go, but forced to go. And then that thing, oh, give so and so a hug, give such and such a kiss. Oh, my goodness. No wonder so many of us feel so disconnected from our bodies when we've had a childhood experience of letting people kiss us and hug us when we didn't want to do that. Which is why I was, telling the story earlier about the little girl at school who always wants to sit in my lap. No, ma'am. I love that you would like to be that close, but you have to get permission for that. Your mommy has to say that's okay. You can't just be jumping up in people's laps. We can't have that. Because because she deserves a childhood of appropriateness, of healthy boundaries. So many of us don't even know how to create a healthy boundary in our life now because we didn't have it when we were younger. No one afforded us the opportunity. No one asked us, do you want to give Uncle so-and-so a hug? No? Well, then you don't have to. No one asked us. so that we had autonomy over our bodies when we were younger. Do you even want to go to soccer? Do you even want to do this? If it's something you don't want to do, then as even as a child, you should have the autonomy to say no. And I know that that's a favorite word for toddlers, and sometimes we have to gauge between giving them their autonomy, but also giving them exposure to new experiences because they have developing brains. It's not always an easy judgment call, but for many of us, we did never had that experience of even being asked, "Is this something you want to do?" You just did it. And so many of us are still walking around doing what everyone tells us to do because we didn't have a sense of autonomy to say no. It was not part of our development as a child when our brains were malleable. And so now we don't know how to do it as adults, how to set a healthy boundary, how to say no and feel good about it. I love when I'm able to say no to people because it lets me know that I can stand up for myself. Even if they're like, "I'm telling you, you want." No, I'm very clear on my no. I may even say no, thank you. But if I said no, that's a complete sentence. And I don't need you to campaign for me to change my mind. I've worked very, very hard to get to a point in my life where I can say no, feel it in my body, and feel, you know, authority enough to stand behind it. And so the experience of exploitation also creates an imprint where we think we have to please other people, even if it means, you know, something against our own will. My beloved had an experience where someone asked him to do something, he just did not want to do it. And I could tell he just did not want to do it. He was being a good friend. He just didn't want to do it. And I'm watching this take place and what it was doing to him. Like, how many of us, someone asks us to do something and you know you don't want to do it. But there's that part of you that's like, well, I guess I have to. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do. And something that I have found that when I have gotten very comfortable and familiar with saying no, my yeses have expanded because I don't ever have to guess on if I really want to do something or not. I'm more open because I've dealt with my issues of exploitation and feeling as though somebody is doing something to me that I don't want done, or because I've resolved those issues, because I've healed those issues, my yeses are more abundant. And I'm less likely to have an attitude if someone says, "Hey, can you do this for me?" Sure. If I have the ability to do it, absolutely. But if someone says, even if it's my children, "Yolanda, can you?" No, that's not something I want to do. I don't feel bad about it. It's taken a lot of work to get to that place, but it is so freeing and so peaceful. Even if the response is, "I can't believe you told me no." I want you to have that same freedom. And even if I come and ask you to do something and you say no, guess what? I'm okay. I'm okay because we should all have that autonomy. That is a part of the healing process. That is how you get justice, where you feel as though you have an inner authority to say yes, to say no, and you don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to use a whole lot of language. It's something that I'm actually working with someone right now. Well, I'll say to them, you don't have to say yes just because I'm asking. You can say no, and you don't have to give me an explanation. And I can see how they're, contorting their face like that's not their experience. Their experience is to always say yes. And I want to give them the gift of no. because I know how freeing that can be when you stand firm in knowing who you are, what you want to do. You are very clear where your lines are. You are very clear about your healthy boundaries. That is how you heal your inner child. You're not waiting for somebody else to give you the permission to feel good about your no or to acknowledge that you've been hurt. I know it. I know where I hurt. Trust me. I'm not waiting for somebody else to acknowledge the pain and then I heal it while I'm over here bleeding. And so, one of the reasons why we do this work is so you don't betray you in the same places and spaces where you feel like you've been betrayed. Don't do that to yourself. My love says exploitation is so real. Some people will say please 1,000 times just to get what they want. They are relentless because we also have a generation of individuals who've never heard the word no, which is why it is important for us to all have a healthy relationship with yes and no. Because if someone tells you no and then you have a tantrum, that's your inner child. That is your inner child. So, if it was your experience as a young person for your every desire and whim to be indulged, then you may not have a healthy relationship with boundaries. And so when someone tells you no, you think it's time to have a tantrum, or as they say, turn into a Karen, because you don't know what no means. And so that may have also been your experience where you were exploited so much, you don't know what a boundary looks like. So you have none. And you think the world is supposed to just open doors no matter where you go. And so if someone says no, you start to have a whole meltdown. We are seeing that play out in so many different places. Someone says no, you can't have the thing that you were not entitled to have anyway, and now you want to have a whole hissy fit. Now the whole plane got to turn around because you want to act up. So yes, exploitation is real. You say no to some people and they're still on you because they have never heard the word no. But we have to take responsibility that if it's also been your experience where you've said no and then people keep asking and then you relent and you give in, now you don't have a healthy boundary with a consequence. How many of us say no, but then we go ahead and do the thing anyway? Why would anybody trust your word if you don't keep your own word to yourself? So sometimes we fall into the pit of exploitation because we don't keep our own boundaries. As they say, you better have a strong no with a consequence. You keep doing these things, and this is the consequence, and stick to it. Stick to it because you are deserving of it. And so if we go over the first four, remember you're innocent in the places and spaces where you are childlike. Now, don't regress back to an immature state of being because you don't want to deal with stuff. That's not what I'm talking about in terms of being innocent. I mean, if you really do not have the developmental skill to deal with particular things because you either never experienced them or you have not healed them, then in many ways you are innocent. Doesn't mean that you're not responsible to gain the emotional intelligence necessary to deal with mature experiences. We all are. But in many ways, your innocence as a child was exploited, manipulated, and it didn't afford you the opportunity to develop skills and behaviors where you can stand firm on who you are and what it is that you desire. All of the people pleasing has an origin, it has a root. All of the overthinking has an origin, has a root, and most of it leads back to childhood. So free yourself right now by continuously telling yourself, The child in me is innocent. The adult in me can take over, but the child within me that hasn't been afforded the opportunity to heal is still innocent. As a child, you deserved care, protection, security, warmth, and appropriate skin contact. If these things were not part of your experience, or they are something that you are not as familiar with as you would like to be, it's not too late. You can give that to yourself now. And so, one of the exercises that can be helpful as you're doing inner child healing is to ask yourself, how old is that wound? So, if you're triggered by something, or if there's something that you're having a challenge with, ask yourself, how old is that wound? Or what age am I feeling? Like I said, sometimes I'm feeling like a teenager. Sometimes I'm feeling like a 7-year old. Sometimes I'm feeling like a 20-year old. It's like, how old is that wound? And why is it coming up now? It's coming up for healing. Why am I having these experiences over and over again where people say something and I shut down like a little girl because that's what I knew to do then? And that's what I'm doing now. Why am I overreacting to particular things? How old am I in that moment? And if I think back to that age, where was the care? Where was the protection? Where was the security? Where was the warmth? Where was the appropriateness in my life? Because maybe it was absent, or maybe there wasn't enough of it. The experience of exploitation is something that all humans are familiar with in some form. Do away with the intent was neglectful. It may have been, but it may not have been. I know I have been exploited by my parents. Who isn't proud of their children and wants the world to see them? Look, put this pretty little outfit on and take a picture so I can show all my friends, whether you want to or not. We were looking at family photos the other day, my youngest daughter and I, and we're looking at pictures, and I can remember how my children were behaving when they took those pictures. And I'm like, yeah, the picture looks great, but you don't know what we had to go through to get the picture. It was a form of exploitation. It's like, I want to capture this memory of you being this particular age and how cute you are in this little outfit and all of the stuff that we go through to get the picture, to get the moment. And for those of you who have ever taken a little person to a photo center, you know what I'm talking about. Everything we go through just to get that memory, that moment. It's an experience of exploitation. Does it create such an imprint that causes trauma? I can't say that it doesn't. We are all so unique. I can't say what looked like an innocent act didn't create an imprint for you that created trauma. I don't get to say that. The only person that gets to say that is you. And we also have to do better, I feel, at letting people have their experience. Somebody's telling you something and you're like, oh, that's not so bad. Let me tell you what happened to me. Let people have their experience, and let's stop making it about us and what we experienced. If I say it was traumatic for me, then daggone it, it was traumatic for me. You don't get to tell me that it wasn't. You don't get to erase it. You don't get to say, oh, it wasn't, oh, that's not that bad. You didn't experience, and you don't know what it feels like in my body. And I don't know what it feels like in yours. Which is why if I'm in a coaching relationship with someone, I don't get to tell them that their story isn't important. Everything that we experience as unique individuals contributes to who we are and how we see ourselves. Let people have their moments. And the fourth one, abuse of any form at any degree can create a lifelong imprint where we are doing things that aren't necessarily harmful, but they're impactful. As I was talking about trust, how many of us, if someone is driving behind us and they make too many turns the same way we do, we pull over to the side because now we think somebody's following us. I do it all the time. It's like, are you following me? Girl, ain't nobody thinking about you. But if you make too many turns behind me in the same place I'm going, I'm not going to pull up in front of my house. I still do that. I will not pull up in my driveway if someone has been following me too long. I'll go to the next street, turn around until I shake you off my tail. It's just part of me. I don't know if it's too many shows, too many true crime shows. We all have to be vigilant, but that comes from somewhere. That has a root, and it creates an imprint where now we're looking at things differently. So, abuse of any form, and the abuse doesn't necessarily have to be inflicted on you personally. It could be something that you witnessed, something that you heard about. I have heard so many stories from my parents about their childhood experiences that created an imprint in how I see other people. I've said before, they grew up in the 30s and the 40s in South Carolina. So the stories that I heard about Jim Crow and how people behave absolutely created an imprint on me. I didn't experience those things, but because someone that I loved experienced it and it impacted them, it impacted me. So until we each decide for ourselves, I no longer want this thing to impact me in that particular way, I'm going to heal it. First, you have to identify what it is. First, you have to become aware that it's within you. Like the thing reaching behind or not letting people follow you home. I know that I'm creating a story in my head of, distrust of people. Do I want to heal it? Then that's something that I have to work on. It's not anyone else's responsibility when I am the one who is creating the story in my head. And we could think, well, if people would just stop following me, then I would be fine. It's not the entire world's responsibility to make you comfortable. You have to create that for yourself. It may not have been created for you when you were a child. I understand that. I acknowledge that. And again, that is why we do the inner child healing, because many of us did not get everything that we deserved, but we can give it to ourselves now. And so, hopefully, going through these precepts, going through these, what I am calling declarations, freedom speech, hopefully they will give you a different perspective of your childhood experience. As I said, all about love certainly had me thinking of things differently. I know my parents loved me well, loved me crazy, but it doesn't mean that there were some things that they did that still impact me to this day. I've got to figure out how to heal that so that I'm not going to carry it on generation after generation after generation, so that my great great grandchildren aren't reaching behind stuff because they don't trust anything. So they're not driving 5 minutes out of the way because they don't trust the person riding behind them. I am hopeful that the more that I work on myself, that the greater good is done for the generations that come after me, so that the impact of so much trauma is not felt. And so I'm grateful that we get to come together every Sunday to talk about how we heal ourselves individually and collectively. Because the healing that I do for me is not just for me, it's for everyone that I come in contact with. And I want every single person that comes in contact with me to have a genuine, pleasurable experience. I don't want to be the catalyst for someone else to have a bad day or feel bad about themselves. I know as a human, it happens. And so I'm working on myself, and I know that you are too, so that I am at peace in my mind, my body, and my spirit. And it's that when other people are in my presence, they also feel. peace, freedom, and most of all, love. I love each and every single one of you. And for the time that we get to spend together, next week, maybe we'll do 3, maybe we'll do 4, or maybe we'll do the inner child chakra healing next week, where we will go through all of the energy centers on our body, the 7 major ones on our body, and do some healing, pull some stuff up. We're going to pull some stuff up so that it can be revealed, so that it can be exposed, and so that it can receive the love and attention that it deserves, so that it is no longer impacting us, the way that we feel about ourselves, and the way that we see the world. You are most welcome, my darling. I trust that as we move through this week, we will think a little bit more about, how am I exploiting myself? How am I exploiting other people? How am I trying to manipulate and maneuver in such a way that it is impacting my relationships? The relationship I have with myself, the one that I have with others, the one that I have with my higher power, which is a correlation to the relationship you have with yourself. I am so grateful that the care, the protection, the safety, and the warmth that I experience on a day-to-day basis is felt internally, so that I can recognize it and identify it externally. Create that for yourself this week. Do away with any victimhood. You are not a victim. You really are not. Even if you've felt victimized by others, because you are doing the healing work, because you are identifying the places and spaces where trauma may rest in your mind and your body, no one can call you a victim. You are a healer. You are healing yourself and thereby healing the collective consciousness. And for that, I say thank you. I love you. Can't wait to get together next Sunday. As many of us are preparing for the holiday season, please, please, please take care of yourself. You know, feelings are raw right now for a variety of reasons. Hydrate, sleep, take your rest, have a strong no, have a strong yes. You know, go within as much as possible. Pause, slow down your nervous system, slow down the way in which you respond to things. Take a breath before you act, and act from a place of response and not reaction. Just take care of yourselves, because you are so deserving of a harmonious life, a harmonious body. And I'm so looking forward to sharing more and more with you. Can you believe we're almost done with the year? Like, we literally are at the end. We're going to have a conversation about death, particularly this time of year when it seems to hurt so much more when we lose people, or when people transition, because we never really lose them. They transition into another form, as we all will do. We'll have a discussion about that, because there's still within us that inner child that has to resolve that many things don't last forever. And so I'm grateful for this work, and I'm grateful for this walk that we have with one another. I love you. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and we'll be back here next Sunday at 1:00. Bye bye. Love you. Oh, don't forget to subscribe and share. I always forget to say that at the end of my video. If you have found value in the work that we are doing here, please share it with others and ask them to join us, either live or through a replay, and continue to make the comments so that I can respond to them. Love you guys. Bye bye.